For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Gist. Korea, Japan, and China are resuming their trilateral summit, although the exact date is still not clear. The trilateral is a fairly old one, goes back to 2008, and they've been having annual summits. It was stopped in 2019 for various reasons, including political and fraught relationship between all three of them. And now they've decided to resume the trilateral again. Although, again, as I mentioned earlier, dates are not clear. So, why is this happening? And is it of concern to India? To answer some of these questions, I have with me Gaurav Dutta. He is an independent scholar. He was earlier with the National Maritime Foundation. He's studied in Japan. He's a specialist on Japan, and he's a PhD from JNU. Gaurav, welcome and glad to have you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be.
So, Gaurav, first things first, this decision to resume the trilateral, exactly what does the trilateral do and why the decision to resume after 4 years of no annual summit?
Well, I think looking at the current conditions, for instance, the increasing tensions, and also, for instance, Japan-China tensions have been on the rise again because of the release of the Fukushima water. The bilateral tensions has been on the rise, and I think Northeast Asia, particularly when you look at China, Japan, and South Korea, they have had a lot of political differences, while at the same time, economic engagements have been fairly normal between the three. Uh,
Hmm.
to manage these, I think current differences, I think one objective has been to uh, manage the political differences. Although and one objective for them also China's push is also to manage their fear of containment following the recent Camp David summit with the U.S., Japan, and South Korea, where U.S. managed to institutionalize the partnership on education, security, and multiple aspects. Now that sort of concerned China, whereas for Japan, they have security concerns with China's increased defense spending and uncertainty with North Korea, and currently with increasing improved ties between China and Russia proves a significant threat to Japan's security interests. Now, that is on this side, whereas in South Korea's side, they have issues with, particularly North Korea, where they feel that China is essential to, manage the North Korean threat. Where, I mean, despite having these differences, I think they felt the need to, maybe, manage these differences through, having a meeting between the three leaders, so as to say.
So, as you mentioned, there was a Camp David summit with the Koreans and Japan. Clearly, this trilateral thing has Uncle Sam's approval.
Uh, are you talking about the Camp David summit or?
Yes, I'm referring to the Camp David summit. So clearly, the it would seem that the U.S. has approved this resumption of the trilateral.
The trilateral, I think, if you're talking about the Camp David summit, I think it has been a long-stated objective of the U.S. to get Japan and Korea closer. Because prior in the Abe and the Moon Jae-in administrations, things went a little south. With bilateral differences where the wartime forced labor. I think with the previous government of Park Geun-hye, they had reached an agreement and a settlement on the dispute, and then Moon Jae-in brought that back up again, and sort of led the bilateral tensions, where ultimately, it led to Japan, suspending chips, supply of chips is essential for South Korean technological industry, and and there wasn't much happening on that front. So I think tensions increased, but with the I think with the new South Korean president, with President Yoon, I think things have gone a little better. I think they have pretty much agreed on a lot of aspects, and they have improved a lot of, I think, agreements. But again, if you look at the recent judgment, again, I think South Korea, there was a recent judgment by South Korea again that 15 people should be compensated for the war, wartime injustices. So as to say, I think that was raised again by the Japanese foreign minister recently, and I think along this summits, I think the leader summits, they intend to manage these political and security differences, while at the same time, uh, also address the concerns of where China wants to, bring in issues of, their fear of being contained, or by potential U.S., Japan, Korea, uh, tripartite agreement. So I think this is to broadly manage these differences and through dialogue. And one thing I think has been stated earlier within the trilateral summit was that to institutionalize. I think that is also something that they want to get at, and it's yet to see. Let's see if that materializes in the long run.
And this move aligns with what the Americans are themselves doing with the Chinese, isn't it?
Yes, I think if you look at, I think it has. I think what the Americans was doing. I think if you look at the the recent Biden Xi summit at the APEC, I think following that summit, I think there was some where I think with President Xi facing some significant domestic, I think challenges at home. I think in the light of these, and fear of containment with partnering of Japan and South Korea with the U.S., the fears have risen, and where China wants to manage the projection, the relations in the broader Asia Pacific, or the Western Pacific, or towards ASEAN region. And with that, I think they need to get, South Korea and Japan on board, where they can, manage the relations. Uh, so I think, if, following Camp David summit and Xi Biden summit as a recent APEC thing, meeting, I think it all has linkages. I think of how they want to manage these differences. I mean,
Mhm.
although I'm not sure if anything substantial will materialize, but it's important. I think they want to get the leaders talking on, on core security concerns that they have.
Mhm. But there is a consensus among the US allies that the tensions need to be brought down. And that's where this is all about, isn't it? The need to bring down the level of tensions.
That's true. That's true. I think I would agree with that. I think because uh, I think the recent, I think tensions. I think one thing that brought South Korea and Japan closer was, I think, over the differences was the outbreak of the Ukraine war, and they realized, they understood that to overcome the historical differences, and in their bilateral relations, and they felt the need uh, to align closely with the U.S., while they're also concerned with increasing assertive China with their increased defense spending, and also growing ties with Russia. But here at the same time, also you have to look at the upcoming U.S. elections, where they failed during the Camp David summit was uh, that a potential re-election of Donald Trump, where during his previous tenure as president, where he threatened to pull out troops, U.S. commitment to the region, you
Yeah.
know, uh, and I think the Camp David sort of structure lies, and part of, even if Trump comes back into power, I think they will have committed, I think, U.S. presence in the region, across different aspects, with security, education, and other aspects. Uh, Whereas I think here with China right now, with the tripartite, I think triparty, I think security, I mean, agreement meetup, I think it is to manage the current issues, the differences. I think uh, from boiling, from expanding into a larger, conflict, because you have the at the Levant, we have the current, Israel-Palestine conflict, and with the Ukraine thing. I
Yeah.
think since South Korea and Japan are allies of the U.S., I think they would rather have a sustained or or more sustained environment, security environment, stable security environment, a stable environment in the region, because that would extend or complicate the situation for the U.S.
Mhm. Does this imply a dilution or a rolling back some of the economic and technology sanctions that the US has imposed?
On China,
Yeah.
I think what from what you've seen, I think the dilution of economic sanctions, or let's say on technological sanctions, I think I don't see any evidence of that. So as to say,
Mhm.
I don't see any evidence of that because I think U.S. has understood what President Xi was aiming at, and I think they have understood that China, has certain aims of being the number one, overtaking the U.S. on certain aspects, and they pose a certain threat to American national interest. On that aspect, I think I don't think U.S. has, I don't see any significant changes on that. So as
Mhm.
to say, I think what they had, I think during the APEC summit was, I think both leaders probably exchanged opinions of their own concerns, and I think is to have a sort of dialogue despite significant differences. I think, but I don't see any changes in or dilution of sanctions on technological or economic aspects.
Mhm. What about North Korea? Is this also about trying to get the Chinese to lean on the North Koreans a bit and, stop them from testing their missiles and rockets?
Yes, I mean the recent launch of the North Korean spy satellite, that created sent alarms in Japan as well as South Korea. I think for South Korea, I think China remains central to to managing North Korea, whereas
Mhm.
China sees North Korea as an important, I think, platform as a bulwark against potential Japan South Korean alliance, or against bulwark against these two allies of the U.S. So I think South Korea looks at China as very essential to managing, I think, the North Korean, missile threats, which they all take because China has all the material and the technical know-how
Yeah.
if they want to provide all the if they want to provide all the capabilities to North Korea. So whereas for Japan, I think Japan has a significant threat. When from the north, from the I think on the north they have Russia, and then they have China in the south, and then and North Korea as well. So it's like a three-front threat for the Japan. So I think whereas despite I think and also the territorial disputes, with China on
Yeah.
the south. So to manage all of these differences, I think Japan is at a pretty tough spot. Significant differences, I think, and right now with China and Russia stepping up the military games, on and recently in the northern sea and north of Japan and on the east of Japan. So on the west of Japan, sorry, and I think that poses significant, concerns in the Japan security establishment. I think uh, that's I think so. I think with the North Korean issue, I think it is a uh, significant issue for both Japan and South Korea. And another aspect that Japan has also with North Korea is the abduction of its nationals that happened in
Yeah. Yeah.
around in the 80s and 90s. And I think this is significant. I think it affects their domestic politics, especially their prime minister. I think there's been a long-standing demand of their citizens to get back their citizens, and that happened long back. So, in addition to just missile launches, this also remains a thorny issue.
Yeah. Mhm. Last question, Gaurav. There is a debate here that among former diplomats and all that, given the fact that the US and China have re-established a dialogue, now there is this trilateral getting underway. It's about time India and China also started their own dialogue. Right now, there is a military level communication going on, basically focused on getting tension on the border down. But is this the time? I mean, so I'm asking you: is India under some pressure? Would you think India would be under some pressure to get its political dialogue with China going again?
I think, I would say, I think dialogue is always welcome. I think, I think Uh, I would always, I think, see dialogue as a good way forward for at least ha- addressing certain security concerns of both nations. Uh, I mean, despite, if you look at the Japan and Korea case, where, they having significant, political and security differences between all the three states, they're still meeting at the leaders level. I think at the same time, whereas if you are to suggest that if India and China should have a leaders level talk, I don't see that as a bad option. I think,
Mhm.
provided, I think we have certain concerns because, following Galwan, it has complicated issues and has not led any, leader level talks. I think where India wants certain, I think results on the ground where we're not seeing, and as a result, we are not able to have any sort of leader engagement at the leaders level. So I think it's a pretty complex issue. I think when it comes to India and China, but I think if we can have a dialogue, then why not? I think we
I
can
mean, it
also
may,
take a leaf out of this.
given the fact that Mr. Jaishankar has said that without a deal on the border, nothing else can take place. Kind of draws a line in the sand, doesn't it?
That's true. That's the exact limitation that I was pointing to. I think it's a little complex for the case in India. I think because the Galwan situation, I think probably complicated the entire issue. Where uh, it's a little too difficult. I think whereas with Japan and South Korea or with China involved, I don't see the same level of I think complexities or
Hmm.
as recent as that. So it is. I think for them it's easier to maneuver and have that leaders level dialogue where they have the occasional maritime sort of assertiveness pushing each other and or the historicity coming into play. Whereas I think it's a difficult. I think it's more complex for India with the current. It's as recent as the current issue, but immediately I think it's going to be tough. But let's see with time. I think if not now, then maybe in the future, if we can see some results and maybe if that can move forward, then why not?
Mhm. So, just to sum up your last reply, to talk or not to talk is something that the MEA will have to bend its mind towards. It's probably something that's already under debate within the MEA. The point is, how does one get around this thing that we have insisted upon, that the border issue should be resolved? And as of now, there seems to be no sign that the Chinese are willing to bring down the tensions on the border, reduce their troops, and return to the locations before Galwan. Gaurav Datta, thank you very much for your time and a lot of insight and perspective there. Thank you again for talking to Strat News Global.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
That's all we have for you on this edition of The Gist. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Good night.